So long as the nations of this earth are armed against each other, we're bound to have more such accidents. And eventually, soon, one must prove fatal. These nations must unite. We must make them unite. And gentlemen, we can make them unite. Now, I don't care what reading of history you take, the pattern is always the same. Whenever a bacteria invasion strikes, or a fire rages, or a wild beast roams the streets, then and only then do men stop fighting each other and work together to save themselves. A common enemy, a common fear, that is the only answer. If all the men of the earth are threatened by an enemy from a hostile planet, well, gentlemen, we are going to create that enemy.
UFO over China. According to reports, an airport in Inner Mongolia was forced to shut down to prevent passenger jets from crashing into the unidentified flying object. Witnesses reported a bright light shining in the sky before it suddenly vanished. On July 8th, Shaoshan International Airport was shut down because of a UFO. Officials later confirmed the object sighted was part of a military test. This latest show in the sky makes for the 8th reported UFO sighting in China since June. X-Files just got real. A group of Air Force officers making sworn testimony to the National Press Club, claiming they've had close encounters of the third kind.
All the UFO sightings were at nuclear weapons facilities, including Minuteman missile silos in Montana. Witnesses said there were multiple missile failures as an unusual object hovered above.
It seemed to have pulsating lights going around it, and it had a white light from the center looking down into the silo.
7 former U.S. servicemen delivered sworn affidavits to the press club about close encounters.
Off through the forest with a bright, glowing object. The best way I can describe it, it looked like an eye. Bright red with a dark center. It appeared to be winking.
Organizers say 120 now retired servicemen reported similar occurrences from the 1960s until as recently as 2007. They said reports were hushed up, witnesses ridiculed.
I was used to the ridicule from the Air Force, except for the dual standard. We're going to ridicule, but it's secret and don't talk about.
Some believe UFOs highlighted nuclear weapons as some sort of warning.
The cover-up of the fact that UFOs did intercede with our nuclear weapons is extremely important.
Is there a government UFO cover-up?
For more on this now, I'm joined by Leslie Keene. She's author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. Leslie, they use the term crackpot, I think, in there. I mean, that's what most people think when they hear, okay, UFOs, and they're coming to America to spy on our nuclear weapons arsenal. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, the point is that these are military guys, and they need to be taken seriously. And, you know, whether they were, what the UFOs were actually doing there, what they actually were, we really don't even know. These guys have their own opinions, and they were involved directly, so they've drawn some conclusions. But basically, these UFOs are seen all over the world in lots of different places. There's physical evidence for it, and you need to put it into the bigger picture of the whole UFO evidence. I think that's what's important.
Why is the government, they raise a point of, you know, why is it they're being told they're nuts, but they're also being told by the government, don't tell anybody it's top secret?
Yeah, I mean, they were told, a lot of them were told at the time that it happened because it was a sensitive installation and they didn't know what was going on, and, you know, naturally you're not going to want your guys going out and talking about it. And you know, the ridicule thing, I mean, it's a long pattern we've had in this country since the 1950s and 60s, and it's just become sort of a habit that really needs to change. And I think my book is trying to do that by presenting serious testimonies, chapters written by, among them, 5 generals and a former governor.
I need a quick answer, but what do you believe after having researched this?
Well, I believe there is definitely a physical phenomenon in the sky that cannot be explained. What it is, we don't know, and I think we need a further investigation to try and find out more about it.
And some more transparency about it would be nice, too.
Absolutely.
You know? I mean, if there's something out there, why doesn't our government just tell us? Like, we need to know.
They might not know what it is either, but they might, and that's one of the questions we don't have the answer to. How much does our government know?
All right, Leslie, interesting, very interesting. Thank you so much for your expertise on it.
Thanks.
Two battlestars just jumped into orbit. Adama's back.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a 6th grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. He said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build the space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
Here it is, my favorite segment of the morning. Real or just a hoax? The question comes up whenever UFOs are mentioned, but now some new support that may surprise you. Tomorrow, former military personnel are speaking out for the first time on camera about their personal experiences with UFOs in Washington, D.C.
Well, here's something you don't see or hear very often. Former Air Force officers held a press conference today in Washington, D.C. Over 120 retired military personnel warned of a quote-unquote ongoing and alarming intervention by unidentified, get this, aerial objects at nuclear weapons sites.
Now the United Nations is getting ready for a contact with aliens from outer space. This is Moslin Alfi. She's out of Malaysia. She will be planet Earth's first interstellar diplomat. Here's the rationale. Sometime later this year, maybe early next year, astronomers will announce that we have discovered Earth-like twins in outer space.
A team of planet hunters led by astronomers at the University of California in Santa Cruz and the Carnegie Institution of Washington has announced the discovery of a planet orbiting a nearby star, Gliese 581, at a distance that places it squarely in the middle of the star's habitable zone. This would be the most Earth-like exoplanet and the first truly habitable one yet discovered. The research was supported by grants from NASA and the National Science Foundation. Images show planetary orbits of the Gliese 581 system compared to those of our own solar system. The Gliese 581 star has about 30% the mass of our Sun, and the outermost planet is closer to its star than we are to the Sun. The fourth planet, G, is a planet that could sustain life.
They could absolutely stand still, and they could go Mach 10 or more at any time. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was not of this earth.
And it was at least twice the size of a 747, like two Boeing 747 airliners nose to tail.
They were about 4 feet tall. They had that same large cranial structure, the giant black sweeping eyes, almost no nose, a hint of a mouth.
I know there are craft. I know those craft have shut down nuclear missiles. I know they're seen over bases,
Proportion
military
of
bases.
UFO sightings that cannot be explained in convention.
The little ones took me to the door, let go of my hand, and I walked on board the craft with these two tall, blonde.
I recalled going into the craft. I recalled an examination, being on a table. I recalled seeing a lot of equipment. I recalled another being besides the Greys in the background that appeared to be supervising the abduction, the event, and the examination.
She woke up one morning and there was no pregnancy.
The President of the United States, the titular leader of the free world, himself cannot get to UFO information, which leads, of course, to the
I've
question.
concluded that there are many different kinds of beings that come from elsewhere in the cosmos. And these beings of many different types have their own agenda.
First, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words,
the scientific community is relentlessly hostile. It's not that they're puzzled or even just skeptical. They are relentlessly hostile to the subject, and increasingly so over the years.
Case, when we've got clear ground evidence, the cow.
In 1947 at Roswell, that technology would be so superior to human technology.
We are being visited and have been visited by alien spacecraft and alien beings. And our governments around the world have covered it up.
There's no question in my mind. I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for almost 40 years. And I know because I've seen them, because I've seen creatures.
They didn't really know what they were dealing with. They also did not understand the technologies. And I think that they also didn't know why these visitors were here. For example, the big increase in all the sightings around the world happened at the time when we began to detonate nuclear weapons. This is not an accident.
Found the object is covered with a biological membrane which seems to prevent the...
I think what we are seeing in the United States is a transition from an earlier policy of official denial to a new policy of openness.
UFOs exist. They come from outside this planet. And it's time to do something about it.
It's one of these currents of history that won't be denied. The truth is going to come out, and when it does, it's going to be explosive.
So once we get that out, we will go back and completely reassemble the 20th century, rewrite it in a way, and may have to go back and rewrite a significant portion of the entire last 12,000 years.
This is the greatest story in human history. And the reason it is the greatest story in human history, it is the greatest story of human history.
A common enemy, a common fear. That is the only answer. If all the men of the earth are threatened by an enemy from a hostile planet, well, gentlemen, we are going to create that enemy.